Good afternoon, respected viewers. It's not often you get to see my forehead, but here we are. Okay, so this is reporting more gladsome tidings that President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin has dismissed General Sergei Surovikin. So Surovikin, I hope I accentuate his name correctly. He was head of the aerospace forces. General Armageddon, they called him. So he had served in Syria, which didn't serve the Syrian people well, where he carried on with traditional Russian tactics of deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure, bombing hospitals, and things like this. Now, I know every armed force probably has done wrong, and most armies have committed atrocities. And the more wars they fought, probably the more atrocities they've committed. But I'm afraid to say that the Russian military's record is egregiously bad. Soldiers often behave badly in war, but even taking that into account, the Russian Army, Navy, and Air Force, their conduct is usually just horrifically bad, as in almost never be reprimanded. You can get a slap across the wrist for the worst crimes against enemy civilians or indeed enemy soldiers after they're captured, tortured, killed, and so on. It's not always cock up; it's often conspiracy. They know what they're doing, and it's centrally directed, and all the rest of it. So that's him. And he's a man after Putin's own heart, a man who's characterized by pitiless barbarism, a man who's just a bloodless bruiser. I saw an interview with him saying that the Kiev regime is criminal and so on. They're leading the country towards death, blah, blah, blah. Well, the only reason people are dying in Ukraine is because of Russia's unprovoked war of illegal aggression, judged illegal by the International Court of Justice, the only ever war in history to be declared illegal by the ICJ. Anyway, so Surovikin, he played an important role last year, was appointed almost a year ago, and had a very vital role in Ukraine before being taken out of that. Nevertheless, he was still head of the aerospace forces. He was a guy who was actually convicted by a Russian court-martial for stealing a weapon and giving it to somebody else. He was cleared on appeal on the basis that he lent this firearm for sporting use or something like that. Seemed rather implausible, the way that he was exonerated like that. I wonder, did he just pull strings? Was it blat as an influence, exchange of favors, how he got off? But anyway, so he persuaded Putin to take two critical decisions. One of them was to target Ukrainian energy infrastructure on the ground this would cause civilian morale to collapse. Well, that failed, although it did cause significant hardship and probably would have killed some babies and some elderly people who couldn't get sufficient heating, for whom just having a sleeping bag was not enough. But in fairness, there was some military rationale behind this, as in the Ukrainian railways are mostly based on electricity. And then if you take out the electricity supply, you can't move trains. And often troops and munition travel by train. And countries, they usually try and take down the enemy's transport system. Will they take out their electricity? Sometimes. I mean, that's maybe not necessarily a war crime, but I think their intention was more to hit civilians than military personnel. And the other one was to withdraw from the city of Kherson, which is west of the river Dnieper, because they were in danger of being surrounded. They might be forced to surrender, be cut off from ammunition, and that was a key moment. But the trouble is, having gone to the east of it, they're never going to get back west of it. But if they hadn't done that, they could have had 20,000 soldiers capitulating. That was about a tenth of the Russian occupation force, and that would be very difficult to replace. Think of all the equipment that would fall into enemy hands. I mean, although if I was the commander going to surrender, say, I'll tell you what, we'll fire every bullet we have, and then the weapons, we'll just throw them in the river to render them useless and then surrender. So we won't actually be handing over any weapons. I don't know if they did that. And they broke the Geneva Convention as part of their withdrawal. I have to hand it to them. They were cunning. They outfoxed the Ukrainians, ordering the Russian soldiers to wear civilian clothes whilst they board boats to cross the river. So the Ukrainians see this from a distance. What? They're taking some civilians with them. Remember, in Kherson, there'll be a considerable number of people who'll be pro-Russian, who might actually want to retreat with them. And some civilians, it seems, went of their own free will. But Russian soldiers in civilian clothing, and the Ukrainians saying, oh, we better not hit that boat. Those are civilians, when in fact they're military personnel. So they got out with virtually no losses. But the suspicion is that he was cognizant of Wagner Group's plot this June, the mutiny. He was very close to Wagner Group. He often interfaced between Wagner Group and the Russian armed forces. Now, until 2022, Wagner Group fighters were almost all veterans of the Russian armed forces, often the paratroopers, so some of the crack units, and they were very highly paid, sometimes maybe 10 times the minimum wage in Russia, because the minimum wage in Russia over a year is like like a pittance, like $3,000 or something like that. So they're getting 30, depending on their rank and what position, they might be getting $30,000, which is a lot in rural Russia. But obviously, you might not be employed for a full month, just for a full year, just for a few months, something like that. And you would earn that money. It's danger money. You would be in combat, it would be very hazardous. So the occupational hazard would be death, fighting in Mali, Mozambique, Libya, Syria, the Central African Republic, wherever. But then used in fighting in Ukraine. But this time they weren't paid very much, and they were just recruited ragamuffin and bobtail people from prison with no military experience in some cases, and just simply use them as cannon fodder, just throw away their lives, fritter them away, and senseless head-on attacks, not having softened up the enemy with artillery, no air support or anything like that, just to draw enemy fire, just as a decoy, like these units they used in the Second World War against the Wehrmacht. People in dark clothing running across the snow to act as a diversion from the real thrust from the actual professional soldiers a bit later on. And the Wagner professionals, their lives weren't thrown away. They're kept when there was a good hope of an attack breaking through. The people they regarded as just runts, they were regarded as expendable. Anyway, but Surovikin appears to be at least aware of this plot, but the FSB, that's Russia's internal security service, Federalная служба безопасности, as in Federal Security Service, it seems that they caught wind of it because they have their eyes and ears everywhere they go. Their informants are almost omnipresent. And so that's why this thing went off half-cocked late June, when Prigozhin, he crossed from Ukraine back into Russia to Rostov-on-Don, that crucial city astride the River Don, which was a real transport hub for everything going into and out of Ukraine, southern Ukraine, certainly in the Russian invasion. And obviously controlling the bridges across the Don, which is very important in itself. And from there, heading towards Moscow, and getting through Voronezh and turning back about 2 hours drive from the edge of Moscow, going with a couple of thousand vehicles, with maybe 10,000 fighters. But Surovikin, the day of that, he released a video, no, don't do this, this is mutiny, and so on. But that doesn't appear to be enough to save him. He disappeared from view. He hadn't been seen or heard from in like 2 months. We're told he was resting. And if you believe he's resting, you'll probably believe there's no war in Ukraine. You'll probably believe it's just a special military operation. You'll probably believe that Russia didn't invade. You'll probably believe that the Ukrainian government is a Nazi regime. You'd probably believe that there was genocide in Ukraine before Putin invaded. So now he's actually been dismissed. Now, they haven't said they've charged him with treason or anything like that, but I don't think he's going to make old bones. If he lives at all, he will not see daylight again. Ironically, his co-conspirator Prigozhin is free, and even on the edges of the Russia-Africa Forum last month, he met an official from the Central African Republic. He's just appeared in a video calling for more recruits for Wagner. And Wagner Group, despite being deregistered in Russia, is now registered in Belarus. And even Putin said it's in some sort of legal limbo. There was this video that Prigozhin released the other day of him in some desert place, calling for more recruits for Wagner. Now, the rumor is already in some African country already. Remember, he hailed the coup d'etat in Mali as an anti-colonial thing. And Russia is obviously the most regressively colonial country there is. I was thinking about this the other day. In the 19th century, lots of countries invaded China and seized Chinese territory. The United Kingdom, the United States, France, Japan, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal. Is that 9 so far? Am I missing one? And Russia. And the only one not to return that land is Russia. All the others have withdrawn. All the others have given China back its soil. But Russia occupies an area north of the Amur River, the size of France. That's out of Mongolia, I think, including Vladivostok, almost as far west as Lake Baikal that they seized from the Chinese. I wonder if the Chinese are going to get it back. It's actually quite rich in minerals, which they didn't know at the time, including oil and gas. So, well, as a sort of Surovikin couldn't happen to a nicer guy. I'm sure that they're having some very amicable conversations, the FSB. They have ways of making people talk. But you think, why is he free, Prigozhin, the actual mutineer who destroyed 7 Russian military planes, it killed about a dozen pilots? Well, he's useful in Africa, but I think he might meet with a nasty accident, might be a plane crash or something like that. Wagner Group was there partly for implausible deniability. Oh, nothing to do with us. It's not the Russian military, despite that they're obviously funded by the Russian state, which has obviously finally been confirmed now. Everybody knew that for ages. The dogs in the street knew that, but wasn't confirmed by documentation until this year. And Prigozhin used to say he had no connection, nor ever had any connection with Wagner, who now openly says, yeah, I'm the supremo of it, says that every day. All right, thank you so much for watching my channel. So please stay tuned in, subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal. Goodbye.